Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Good evening and welcome to a special Juneteenth edition of Chicago Tonight Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman and thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight,
I had no idea of how important and significant this place is to African American history.
From the Civil War to civil rights and everything in between, even in death, the lives of these prominent Black Chicagoans are educating others. A new social organization supporting Black women scholars at the University of Chicago on the 100th anniversary of the country's first Black female Ph.D. And award-winning chef ERICK Williams on the significance of Juneteenth and honoring Black contributions to American cuisine. First up, Americans have a new day to celebrate freedom. On Thursday, President Joe Biden signed a bill making Juneteenth a federal holiday. The day commemorates June 19, 1865, when news reached Texas that the Civil War had ended and that the enslaved were free. That was more than 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, Illinois Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, and Vice President Kamala Harris offered their thoughts on what Juneteenth means to America. Here's some of what they had to say.
Days like Juneteenth remind the world that Black history is truly American history and provide us with an important opportunity to reflect on the continued work we must do to create a society where all Black folks have free, unrestricted access to the resources that we need to enjoy the full measure of citizenship. Slavery might have officially ended in 1865, but we are still grappling with the vestiges of that original sin here today. From historic neighborhood disinvestment to institutionalized racism that holds our people back from realizing their God-given potential just because of the color of their skin. These inequities continue to keep far too many Black folks away from opportunities and upward mobility. And we cannot simply stand idly by and continue to allow that to happen.
Neither the Emancipation Proclamation nor the Declaration of Freedom on the first Juneteenth, and not even the 13th Amendment, allowed us as Black people to fully embody the freedom that we all deserve. Rather, we celebrate Juneteenth to acknowledge the deep faith and strength of our ancestors that propelled us to this moment. And it is a time to come together in every community of our state to recommit to and work towards the highest ideals of freedom for all. Dr. Maya Angelou said, "The more you know your history, the more liberated you are." Juneteenth National Freedom Day will help ensure every Illinoisan knows our history and that future generations know our history, and that in itself is liberating.
When we establish a national holiday, it makes an important statement. National holidays are something important. These are days when we as a nation have decided to stop and take stock, and often to acknowledge our history. We must learn from our history, and we must teach our children our history, because it is part of our history as a nation. It is part of American history.
Now, some of that history the Vice President is referring to is buried right here in Chicago, literally. A Chicago Architecture Center walking tour takes us to the headstones and mausoleums of some of Chicago's most influential activists, politicians, and entrepreneurs who shaped history in the 155 years since the first Juneteenth. For many Chicagoans, the Bishop Ford is just a bustling freeway through the South Side. But the man it's named for, Bishop Lewis Henry Ford.
He was the eulogist at the funeral of Emmett Till.
A funeral that would galvanize the civil rights movement on that fateful day in 1955, after Till was lynched in Mississippi.
The pictures of his corpse were then published in John Johnson's Ebony and Jet for the whole world to see, and every African American in the country was able to see what had happened.
Today, both Johnson and Ford lie in rest just next to each other inside Oakwood Cemetery in the Greater Grand Crossing community. Their final resting place is shared with so many other Chicagoans who helped write the city's and the country's history. The Chicago Architecture Center's walking tour of Oakwood Cemetery, called Civil War to Civil Rights, traces history through the people buried here. Among them, more than 4,000 Confederate military prisoners in a mass grave.
We begin at the Confederate mound, but that's not where we end. That's the end of the Civil War. And then we move into Reconstruction, the Great Migration, and the modern civil rights movement. And all the people here that were involved in all of that difficult transition for our country.
Another theme that is a part of the tour when we talk about Reconstruction is that people often have the feeling that history is always about progress. You're always moving forward, things are always getting better. But what we see in some examples on this tour is that there's often a lot of regression.
Erica Miles is one of the docents for this tour, along with Mary Jo Hogue, who wrote it. During the tours, they explained to visitors the significance of Chicago's first black mayor, Harold Washington.
He was elected mayor in 1983, and unfortunately he passed in 1987. But if you look at what he was able to do in that span of time, it's pretty amazing.
And anti-lynching crusader and journalist Ida B. Wells.
It was, just amazing to me to learn about what she did, the time that she did it, how very dangerous it was, and how significant it was in terms of raising the awareness of what was happening to African Americans.
Also buried here, Olympic great Jesse Owens, who beat Hitler's Nazis in track and field at the 1936 Olympics. Miles explains history, dates, and places are important, but what she really hopes visitors can sense is the context of the time period.
We tend to mythologize these people, and we tend to make them larger than life, and we say, well, they were able to accomplish this because they were this, super human person, but that's often not the case. It's often just regular people who are rising to the challenge.
Other notables buried at Oakwoods include social services advocate Ada S. McKinley and Negro League baseball icon Ted Double Duty Radcliffe. Also buried there, U.S. Senator from Illinois Lyman Trumbull, who wrote the 13th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, and the Freedmen's Bureau Act. The Chicago Architecture Center is offering the Civil War to Civil Rights Tour an additional 4 dates this year. You can visit our website to learn more. 100 years ago this month, Georgiana Rose Simpson became America's first black woman to graduate with a Ph.D. She earned her doctorate as well as her bachelor's and master's degrees in German philology at the University of Chicago. Now, 2 of the university's students are honoring her trailblazing achievement with the Georgiana Rose Organization, a social group supporting black women and feminine-aligned students in academia. Joining us now are Dayo Adeoye, GRO Vice President, and Georgiana Rose Organization's President, Marla Anderson. Welcome, both of you, to Chicago Tonight Black Voices. So Marla Anderson, let's start with you, please. Tell us, who was Georgiana Simpson, and how did her story inspire the creation of your organization?
That's a great question, and it's so hard to answer because how do we really know who Dr. Simpson was besides what we know from written history? I think that's the most interesting thing, is that there's both written and unwritten. And so from the written history, we know that she was, barred from being able to be on campus in the halls because other students, her peers, didn't want her on campus. We know that she faced other struggles, after she graduated from U Chicago with her PhD. She was unable to find teaching positions because people didn't think her achievements were enough. And so what I really admired about Dr. Simpson's story was, one, her resilience, and two, her commitment to investing and reinvesting into her community. I think that's really where GROW comes from. You know, as Black women at a predominantly white institution, we're going to face our own challenges and our own times to be resilient. And so just following in those footsteps, reinvesting in our community, those are the things that I found most inspiring about her story.
And Dio, this is, you know, obviously the campus has sororities, Black sororities, white sororities as well, but this is the first organization specifically for Black women at the University of Chicago. What gap are you trying to fill, or what role are you trying to offer to the other Black women students at UChicago?
Right. One thing about UChicago is that it's a campus that's dedicated to free speech. This is a pillar that they always try to sort of emphasize, but they never talk about the conditions that are needed in order to foster this free speech. So the gap that we are really trying to fill is creating that space of care, that space of comfort, to know that we are validated as women in our experience and know that those experiences are intersectional. And such, then when we go into these spaces and we go into the world, we are equipped with the confidence then to speak freely, to be ourselves, because we always know that on campus specifically, there is that space, and that's what GROW is.
And briefly, how would you say this is different from the sororities, of course?
And of course, it's different than the sororities because it is for Black women, by Black women, and we are specific to those needs. Whereas, of course, there's other spaces that are more general in focus that are also Black in focus. But when we talk about Black women, and we understand that those are a specific category of people, that's what makes us different.
Marla, I know that you are building community, not just with each other, but also with Black-owned businesses in the U of C area. How are you all going about that, and how's it working?
Well, I would be lying if I said it was difficult. Chicago is so filled with so many great Black-owned businesses, Black women-owned businesses. I think especially due to racial unrest last year, even Google has done a better job of making it simple to say Black-owned businesses in my area. And so we've been able to go to Semicolon, which is a bookstore in Chicago, the only Black women-owned bookstore and gallery. We've been able to go to Kilwins, and if you don't know about Kilwins, it's a Black-owned chocolate shop, chocolate and ice cream. And we've also went to the Bisa Butler exhibit at the Art Institute, which is Black women quilt artists. And so it's the Black woman culture, Black women business. They're so evident that it's not even hard to find, but we just want to make sure that we're drumming up support from both the community and our organization, so we can just get together and go and have a good time. And then saying that, you know, like if there are Black women businesses or Black businesses in Chicago that would like to see us, that would like to invite us over, and, you know, so we can all have a good time and sharing this community together, that would be amazing. So yeah,
more opportunities
definitely nothing hard.
Yeah, more opportunities for community, it sounds like. Dio, I know you all are just getting started, but what's the future for GRO or GROW?
The future for GROW is very bright. We look to, first and foremost, have more social events, make sure we build that community. And also, we hope to get more politically involved and work with the greater community in terms of different Black women-facing organizations around Chicago. For example, COCO, we want to work with them in the future, and also continuing to uplift the voices of our really great members. So all of that is more to come.
COCO, the Kenwood Oakland community organization there. Briefly, there's a bust of her in the Reynolds Club on campus. Dio, why is that a significant location?
Oh, for many reasons. I think the most striking one for me is that her bust stands parallel to the exact president who refused to let her live on the UChicago campus. Her bust is in a central location on campus that everyone will get a chance to see if they are a student here. And so I think for us, it was like, it's like a welcome almost to the Black students.
And once upon a time, it was a club that was only accessible by white males. That's obviously not the case now.
Exactly.
My thanks to the women of GROW, Dayo Adeoye and Marla Anderson. Thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Up next, this week's throwback on how some cities and states were celebrating Juneteenth long before it was recognized as a federal holiday. Stay with us. Though the nation is only just now recognizing Juneteenth as a holiday, it's long been celebrated in some cities and states. It was first proposed as a holiday in Chicago some 20 years ago. In this throwback from 2001, Chicago Tonight's Rich Samuels looked at how Juneteenth was observed by our neighbors to the north.
Milwaukee boasts the largest Juneteenth celebration in the Midwest, 80,000 on Milwaukee's King Drive on the 19th of last month.
Juneteenth is one of those expressions saying, hey, we are proud, we were freed by a country that had once enslaved us. Remembrance is really important, just like the Jewish tradition, never forget the Holocaust. I think we in this country would be remiss if we ever forgot the Civil War and slavery.
Milwaukee's Northcott neighborhood house brought Juneteenth to Milwaukee 30 years ago. Mac WEDDLE recalls how it happened.
One of the staff persons was visiting her great-grandparents in Georgia, and they were celebrating an event called June Day. And she had come back to Milwaukee and told the staff of what she had seen in Georgia. So staff thought it was a great idea to incorporate some of those things that she had seen in Georgia, block off 2 streets on King Drive, which is, well, on 3rd Street then, which is King Drive now. And they had this street festival in the honoring of the freeing of the slaves.
There's now a national movement for the recognition of Juneteenth. Florida, Oklahoma, Delaware, Idaho, and Alaska have joined Texas in officially declaring Juneteenth a state holiday. South Shore has been the venue of a Juneteenth celebration here for the past 6 years. Organizers say this year's 5,000 participants show Juneteenth is catching on in Chicago.
Our young people and people in the community know about our celebration. Every flyer that we pass out in the community, we have the information of what Juneteenth is. That is the oldest celebration of freedom in the United States.
But just because a celebration is successful, does it follow that that should be an officially recognized holiday? And does Juneteenth rise to that level?
Oh, definitely. You know, I've talked with people, and some people say, well, it's our holiday automatically, but I think it's something that should be recognized nationally.
Because I think it needs to be shared with the rest of the country. We're still in denial. We're still in denial over the things that happened during slavery, some dastardly things.
And with Juneteenth gaining wider recognition, what significance does it hold for Black Americans? And how do they try to honor its legacy today through their work? ERICK Williams, award-winning executive chef and owner of Virtue Restaurant in Hyde Park, recently spoke with us about what the day means to him and what he's doing in the culinary world to promote equity. I began by asking him what significance the holiday holds for him.
Well, first, thanks so much for having me on. I think it holds a lot of significance, and it's very personal for me. We're in 2021, and we are still fighting the battle of having access to capital in African-American communities and in communities of color abroad. Why that means so much to me is because once the news hit Texas, then the slaves had nowhere to go. And so we are making forward strides in terms of creating our own narratives, sharing those narratives, which gives me a lot of hope in our ability to communicate both in our communities and abroad. However, we are still in a space where we have to continue to put pressure on banks and institutions that provide opportunities, because it doesn't do us any good if we're free and we have nowhere to go.
Obviously, you know, the slaves or the enslaved people in Galveston at the time learning about the end of the Civil War and that they had been freed, you know, it's a matter of access to, they didn't have information and resources then. And you've talked about how in your industry there's also, there are barriers to information and resources. How do you try to remove some of those barriers?
I think it's centered around dialogue. You know, as an entrepreneur or chef owner, however you like to fashion that, it's becoming increasingly important for me to trade notes with fellow operators, get a better understanding of things that I don't know, share information about things that I'm very savvy about, because we're all fighting an uphill battle. Being a small business is a very tough endeavor. And I think the world has seen that over the last 13 months.
You've also received, as we mentioned, the Medal of Honor from the mayor. How do you hope to use that platform?
Well, I'm going to use that platform the same way I use any platform, with a great sense of humility and with a lot of purpose. We didn't open Virtue by mistake. Our restaurant it stands on the shoulders of its very definition, and that is of high moral standard. And and we use the two borders to encompass that moral standard, being kindness and hospitality. And so we take people in, we satiate them, and we make sure that people have the opportunity to see dignity, intelligence, and ingenuity throughout our space on a night-to-night basis. We feel good about that, and it is extremely disarming. Once we're able to feed people, then we're able to get them to hear our story.
We've obviously been through an enormously difficult year, restaurants especially. How did Virtue respond in this past year?
Well, we responded in many ways. One of the ways that's most talked about is our commitment to taking care of first responders via healthcare workers. We sent tens of thousands of meals out to local hospitals, predominantly the University of Chicago, to make sure that both the morale was lifted and to let our first responders know that they matter to us. We've all endured an incredibly challenging year, and it's important to us to both be a part of the community, but also to be supportive of the community.
You also, of course, as you mentioned, you were able to stay open when many restaurants sadly had to close. Why was it important for you to stay open, especially for your staff?
Well, it's another scenario where our people had nowhere to go. Unemployment offices were overwhelmed, and you know, we just felt like the best use of our time would be to work through the confusion that was going on at the onset of the pandemic and the close downs. And so what we did is we stabilized our business. We made sure that we could operate at a break even. And part of the revenues that we brought in, we supported our team members with by way of forgivable loans. And that has worked out very, very well for us. It has been a huge investment and a lot of loyalty and Thanksgiving on the side of the community and our team members. And, you know, we're just grateful that it all worked out.
Of course, as we mentioned, Juneteenth is getting a lot more recognition. And there are many ways in which, you know, Blacks and the African-American contribution to American culture has been overlooked. How do you try to combat that through the food that you serve at Virtue?
Well, again, I think, you know, when you have the opportunity to provide a meal for someone, food is the great equalizer. And so it offers a level of trust. It offers a level of care and a level of service. And we take all of those things very, very seriously. And we continue, again, to use our platform to spread the word as far as we can. I think, you know, many people are saying now, wow, I didn't know that happened in Texas. Wow, why haven't I heard the story before? And for the African-American community, we've become accustomed to our stories not being told. And so we take these moments to really stabilize, to pivot, and to push forward, not just this message, but the many messages that have been lost or buried over the years.
And before I let you go, what more do you think needs to happen to be sure that people are educated about the history of African Americans?
I think, again, that we need to continue to spread the word. We need to continue to celebrate the contributions that Blacks have made both for and in this country. But I think more than anything, you know, our Constitution encompasses this ideal of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. with liberty being a pretty big word. And so until all of our fellow Americans are in a position where liberty rings, we're going to continue to have struggles. So I think, the promotion of liberty, the promotion of life, and the promotion of the pursuit of happiness will probably be at the top of my agendas and will continue to be as we advocate for people both near and far.
Okay. Chef Eric Williams of Virtue, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this. And that's our show for this Sunday night. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News, including what to know about at-home COVID-19 tests. And join Paris Schutz and me this week at 7 on Chicago Tonight. And we leave you tonight with some shots of the latest exhibit at the Morton Arboretum. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.